Breaking Bad's characters are criminals. They are dangerous individuals that regularly break the law. Most of the things they do are actively harmful to others. Murders, extortion, and theft are common occurrences in the world of drug trade. Despite doing these things normally and tolerable in real life, we find it easy to relate to and root for these characters. Even when we don't root for them, we're still able to empathize with their struggles. It's easy to imagine someone feeling sorry for even a person like Gus when he lost his partner, or Walt when his marriage slowly crumbles. Of course, this is partially due to the way the show presents them. The more we know these characters, the easier it is to understand their perspectives. However, a big part of emphasizing with morally gray characters is discovering their reasoning for doing these heinous activities in the first place. Every single criminal in Breaking Bad has a driving force that drives them, a raison d'etre, without which they wouldn't even dream of becoming criminals. It's strange that almost without exception, all of these reasons ended up being tied to another person, another individual they consider important in their lives, that became integral in their motivation to commit crime. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the reasons Breaking Bad characters can go to great lengths and commit acts of unimaginable cruelty, and how that's a big source of their character depths. The first concept that serves as a recurring motive to justify crime is family. It is very accessible and immediately understood. Most people would go to great lengths for their families. It isn't hard to imagine someone resorting to crime to protect or help their loved ones. In Breaking Bad, this concept is most notable in Walter and Mike. Although both claimed to commit crimes for the sake of their own respective families, it slowly revealed how Walt had a twisted sense of altruism in comparison to Mike. Walt merely saw his family as his possession. He saw them as properties that belonged to him. In Walt's mind, they were only his as long as they relied on and depended on him. This was why he was never willing to receive any help from other parties, even when they would help his situation tremendously. Walt's family, just like any other thing that he saw as his, was only important insofar as it contributed to his ego and self-worth. Walt needed to feel like his family owed their well-being and financial abundance to him specifically. Despite this, Walt's family remained an important driving force for his journey through the world of crime. However, it didn't work nearly the same way as Mike's did. Mike genuinely saw his family as separate individuals that fell under his responsibility. Like Walt, Mike wanted to guarantee their well-being, but while Walt's descent into crime was all about himself, Mike's was anything but. Mike simply wanted security for his family. It just so happened that the best opportunity presented to him was the one that broke the law. Despite these differences, Mike and Walt were driven by their family through and through. It might seem like the concept of family is an easy and basic motivation to use as a character's fundamental motivation. However, as we could see with Walt, it can also be an interesting way to communicate layers of character, organically presenting to the audience the kind of person they truly are. Another set of characters who rely on family as a powerful driving force is the Salamancas. Being a crime family, the Salamancas rely on rigid and ruthless family values that they always conduct themselves by. This subtle difference shows us yet another facet of how family can be used to facilitate criminal motivations. Unlike Walt or Mike, the Salamancas don't use family as a way to justify crime. They have a specific set of moral codes that they abide by, and the rest are of no consequence. This only reinforces their familial bonds, but also places them in contrast to other individuals that commit crimes for the sake of their families. Despite being capable of terrible things, the Salamancas are loyal to each other and would stop at nothing to preserve them. Not all characters in Breaking Bad are driven by families. Certain characters are in it for themselves. However, this still doesn't mean that their motivations are completely detached from other significant individuals. In the case of Jesse, this individual is ever-changing. In the beginning, he was simply doing it because it was all that he knew how to do. However, this slowly changed as he started working with Walt. He began to look for his approval. It became the reason he wanted to stay in the drug business. Even when Walt declared that he wanted out, Jesse still looked for his approval, revealing to Walt that he had been secretly paying attention to his lessons to make a proper batch of meth. After a while, even this changed. As Jesse met Jane and eventually Andrea, Jesse discovered his reasons to keep going. As he went deeper into the world of crime, So did his complexity as a character and his drive to acquire larger amounts of capital for the good of the ones he loved. Jesse's driving motivation is the most flexible out of all Breaking Bad's characters, growing along with him as the series progresses. Gus, on the other hand, is the character that is the most consistent when it comes to his motivation. As a cold, calculating businessman, it seemed like business was the only thing Gus cared about. However, we later figured out that Gus was mostly driven by revenge. His fixation on this singular issue became the source through which his layered character writing shines through. Gus was obsessed with getting his revenge. His logical, calculating persona masked a hate-filled rage that became his main reason to keep going. As detached and unemotional as Gus was, he still manifested his desire into a significant individual. Ironically, Hector became Gus's main drive as a character. Despite being driven by hate, Gus was fixated on Hector, even to the point of saving his life in order to prolong his suffering. Gus and Jesse became examples of how even self-driven characters eventually latch on to one or multiple individuals as the basis of their driving motivations. There is one character, however, who seemingly stands on his own in terms of motivation. Todd, as a determined, hardworking psychopath, only concerned himself with doing his best. He did not care for others, nor did he let other people affect him emotionally. Todd was intensely detached, and while his sweet demeanor and friendly disposition might suggest otherwise, he was not doing what he did for anything other than himself. This was why his weird infatuation with Lydia seemed interesting. It might suggest that Todd's main motivation was dependent or at least affected by another individual. In the moments that we saw Todd interact with Lydia, it did seem like the feelings he had for her were genuine. As a young man, Todd was genuinely attracted to Lydia. Whenever possible, Todd tried to prolong their work relationship together, obviously expecting it to transform into something more. However, this notion is simply incorrect. Todd's motivation was in fact not dependent on Lydia or anybody else. Despite being infatuated with Lydia, one can imagine that Todd would not have many qualms about killing her if that seemed like the most rational thing to do. This is further supported by the fact that Lydia wasn't the only person that was able to affect Todd emotionally. Todd was in obvious distress when Walter thought that his meth lab wasn't good enough. Just like how Todd wanted to please Lydia and prolong his relationship with her, so did he want Walter's approval. All of these are ultimately based on Todd's psychopathic yet pragmatic tendency. As a person, Todd was incredibly twisted and seemed to be unable to let his empathy get in the way of his cold, hard practicality. Todd was first and foremost driven by his programming. He was trained to zero in on a very specific goal, and he would do everything in his power to make that goal a reality as best he could. Todd seemed to genuinely have the capacity for empathy, companionship, and love, but his twisted sense of pragmatism makes it impossible for him to form a genuine romantic bond. This unique twist on a character's main driving force made Todd stand out even as a side character. It contrasted him with every other main character who had a face or two tied to their main reason for committing crimes. Breaking Bad's characters all have different motivations to do what they do. In their own way, they can stand apart from the rest of the cast by gravitating toward their main driving force in subtly different ways. The colorful cast of Breaking Bad shows us that the noblest intentions aren't always noble. However, understanding these intentions might lead us to be able to emphasize with even the cruelest of acts.